Yeah, and I think when we mention vision, oftentimes we think it's only when we have the ball, but man, it's so effective and efficient when we're using it defending. And in a case like that, you would use it. And even when you talk about transition, when you're transitioning to defend, and recovery runs are being made centrally, there's got to be communication and scanning to identify the most dangerous players.
Yeah, in the moment.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, one thing I think that's important to add, a couple things, but I'll start with one. The 9 is extremely important from a defensive responsibilities perspective inside any of the similar 4-3-3s that we play, right? Because if the 9 is lazy in defense, then everybody else is scrambling. And so Jeremy mentioned the fact that I talk about that first point of pressure, right? The 9 doing his job is something that sets the bar for how everybody else is going to do their job. And it really sets the tone for the success of the team. But within that, like I often talk, and I heard it from Jeremy, and we started at the younger ages that talks about hunting in packs, right? And so like when we think about pressing, so Jeremy, go to the pressing slide. When we think about pressing inside of this environment, the 9 and the 11 become the pack, right? That's going together to press into the 4, or oftentimes it's the 9 and the 10 together, or the 7 and the 9 together. If any of our players, and when you'll see that your team gets the most broken down is when any single player goes to press on their own. And so for the older coaches, the younger coaches, whatever the age group that you are coaching, you really want to make sure that the recognition of the team to go as a group, especially in pressing moments, is how they're going to find success. I just think that that's so important for you guys to recognize, is that they got to go together. Any other questions?
It's a great point, Zach. Questions, comments, thoughts on this, thoughts on the system?
Does anybody allow or think it's valuable to allow pressure outside of their 7 and 11? I mean, allow the ball outside the 7-11, or does everybody focus on bringing it inside right now?
I invite it out wide personally. I bait it out wide so that you can then force it back central.
So bait it out wide where, Sarah? What part of the field?
So if their 4 is on the ball, right? I have my 9 do the same thing, force it one direction, make it obvious, but I'll tuck in my 11 even more. So that pass to the 2 is inviting, and I want them to play that ball. So then that 11 forces them back central. So I just get it one more pass out wide before forcing it central. Okay. Instead of allowing that penetrating ball from a center back to a center forward, potentially, I'd rather that ball be from a 2 to their 8, where our central midfielders can now pick that pass instead of potentially getting into tackles or playing on a center mid's back. I'd rather invite them to pick a pass.
So, but so I guess 2 questions. One, does your 9 put reverse pressure on the ball after it goes to the 2, or is their job done after they've forced that ball wide?
No, they're still in. So then if they try to go back to that center or that center back, but they have to be careful, right? Because what we definitely don't want is them to skip that strong side center back and play that weak side center back. Then they're out the other way. So they kind of drop in a little bit so that 2 can't play the 5. And then if they play it to the 4, now they're under pressure even tighter from the 9.
Do you find that that requires an extra pass in transition to get to the goal? Like, so I guess my question is, right, let's say that you win it in that deeper lying position. Do you play and I'm assuming you're talking about your Yale team. Do you play to build from there?
No, we go from there. So now, we've pulled their outside backs, they're wide, they want the ball. And now when they play it, our wingers can then get in behind them because, their center backs are playing their outside backs maybe a little bit higher.
Yeah.
So when our central midfielders do win it, we look to find our 7 or 11 now in and behind, in the space behind that too.
So, okay, perfect. I think that's great. And so again, what Sarah's saying for the group is she's allowing that first pass out of transition to be, so their defensive starting spot is a little bit deeper, right? Based upon her 11 putting the first line of pressure on the ball, or the second line of pressure, but really the first engagement points. And is that because you feel the outside backs are weaker in the league, or is that because you want to expose the space behind the outside backs in transition?
A little bit of the second, but I just think when you can pick a pass coming from an outside back centrally, now when your center mids step on that, we're running at them, right?
Yeah.
When you're playing that ball central from a center back to a center mid, typically, I mean, if they read it right, they can jump it and front that, but I feel we get more turnovers by forcing that outside back to play that ball central, and it allows our center mids in that transition to get set a little bit. It buys them a little bit more time to get set and get in their positions by that first ball going out wide. Now we've shifted our 3 center mids together.
Yep.
Instead of that first ball going central when our center mids might not be compact enough.
Yeah, got it. So yeah, so I think what you're kind of explaining, and stop me if I'm wrong, is a combination of a structured press, right? So it's not a full press forward to close down the space as quickly as possible. It's more of a structured press, and it's also not sitting deep, right? So it's the combination of the two, right? So very similar, but she's just catching that in between moment. So she's not sitting as a deeper block, but she's also not pressing her whole team higher. So again, what I would say is what Jeremy's point is, right? If we go back to Italy, well, there's just a third element of the game that you can bring them is what channels do you want? So, a good friend of mine is Tom Butler. He is methodical in how he plays. He's at Southeast, and it is the same pattern of play every single time, right? And when we used to play, in the beginning of the game, I would press his center backs. And then in the second half of the game, I would press his outside backs, right? And it would be very different in that, all right, who is the better ball players on his team that are better in possession? And I want to move the ball away from those players, right? And so for you guys to understand and to be thinking about is like, okay, what am I doing from a defensive point of view? And what is the repercussion of what I want, right? So be thinking about the opportunities. So in Sarah's example, her opportunity is, okay, where they turn them over and what openings that creates, number one, who she wants on the ball in those moments of transition, right? And what that does to set up her team for success. I think that's a really good point, Sarah. And you do it out of a 4-3-3. Yeah.
I think, Zach, you made another great point in there. Basically was, who do you want on the ball for your opponent, right? So if you know that the center back is a particularly good passer of the ball, then yes, you may want to adjust the game plan right away and go to something more along the lines of what Sarah's mentioning, where we force the ball, invite the pass wide, and enforce the ball, so we're not allowing them to pick us apart, and recognize that the outside backs might be weaker. And it might be the same in reverse if you realize that the outside back is particularly good, or the holding midfielder is particularly good, identifying, or as you mentioned with Tom, the way that he plays, identifying what they're trying to do and really take that away. There's no such thing as never and always doesn't exist. You have to kind of adjust to what the game is giving you in terms of the players, what you have, and the players that the opponent has, and how do you recognize how to apply pressure in such a way that's going to leverage to your advantage. So I love the conversation and the variety. It's great.
Yeah, I think so what do we loop all of these conversations back to? We loop them back to your preparation, right? And so there are moments of the games for each of these activities. There are moments of these games for each of these opportunities, right? And so if I'm losing, if Sarah's losing, she might ask her team to press higher because they can't give them that time on the ball. If she's winning, she might sit even deeper, right? And vice versa. But part of our responsibility is the game awareness, right? The gamesmanship, as I would call it, from our athletes to understand what that means. And then the nuances of the tactical changes that we make, right? And so, like right now, you know, in futsal is a prime opportunity to manage a 1-2-1 versus a 2-2 with the way that you can press, or vice versa, right? How you can break down a 2-2 with a 1-2-1 with the way that you build. And so you want to be thinking about the nuances of the pressing or the sitting in or the allowance of that first pass, and how you teach it in a training environment so that you can use each of them at the given times, right? So like, I can't not have taught them that second layer of that entry point that Sarah talked about, and then expect them to be able to do that, right? So I need to be thinking about my training environment that says, hey, today we're going to work on this style. And that's a lot of positional play activities afford you the ability to kind of work through those things with your team.
So, and then the one other point that I want to bring up is because it came up in the answers to the quiz last week was kind of how does this relate to the younger ages, right? So we talk about, you know, we're talking about the positional role of the 9 a little bit, the positional role of the 11 a little bit, but really it's conceptual. Really it's an understanding of, okay, when the other team, and recognizing the moments of the game, reading the game, understanding what's going on, and training the players from an early age that, number one, they have to develop a hunter's mentality out of possession. Number two, there are certain things that we're going to look for that we're going to cue us to go apply pressure to the ball. And then depending upon the role I have in that moment, these are the different things that might be required of me. So if I'm playing as a striker, I'm going to have the requirement of setting the edge. I'm going to have to hunt the ball from side to side, oftentimes be that first pressure and work incredibly hard. And then again, be available to win the ball when we win the ball to counter. If I'm playing in a wide position, and it's not so much that I'm playing the 11 or the 3 specifically, but if I'm playing in a wide position, I have to understand what that role is in terms of when the ball is on my side of the field, sealing the edge and helping us to squeeze the space, versus when the ball is on the opposite side of the field, tucking in and helping protect that center midfielder, since we might only have one in a 7v7 game, or if the 2 in a 9v9 game, you still might have to deal with the weak side to provide some balance to the team and maybe some cover to your outside back behind you. And then if I'm a center back, or I'm playing in a back 2 or a back 3, how do I shift? So if the ball's on this side of the field, how do the 3, 5, and 4 shift so that we have, again, maybe it's pressure on the ball, maybe it's cover for someone higher pressing the ball, and then we have the organization behind it to provide cover and balance. So even though we don't have the full team, we can chunk out the information and parse out the information in such a way that the players at the younger ages are getting it in smaller numbers and in smaller doses, so that when they get to 11v11, they have an understanding of what's being asked of them.
Cool. Awesome. All right, Jay, that's good. Guys, I think that's perfect amount of time. I think, Sarah, I appreciate your comment. Chris, your comments. I'd love to hear other people have questions and things along that lines in these conversations. But I've been loving these. I hope you guys have been enjoying these as well. And next week, we're going to get back into culture. We're going to talk about our core values a little bit more and why we've built them the way that we have. Going to touch base a little bit more on the Leadership Institute as well, with what we're building out there and how it's going to be really fruitful for the players. So appreciate you all getting on today, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. See ya.
Thank you.